The Black Pearl. Written by Brian Jaboyne. Narrated by Sean Francis. As he stood upon the wooden ship, his mind began to drift off and his body remained perfectly still, like someone posing for a portrait. His eyes felt like they didn't know how to blink. He was captivated by the breathtaking beauty. He never saw it from this point of view. In front of him was a place filled with unending grains of golden sand, as if the whole island was made out of gold itself. Shimmering blue waters that sparkled in the presence of the sunlight encircled the island. Greenery spread all around the island, with patches of different coloured flowers that grew among the bushes occasionally. In a distance was a majestic waterfall that looked like a sheet of blue velour swishing down, its edges hemmed with whipped white lines. The water thundered down into the pool like a gigantic water spout. It was a beautiful day on the island that afternoon, until all of a sudden, bang, 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 shots fired into the sky. The boys were all gathered together on deck like a herd of sheep. There was a look of fear and confusion on all their faces. "Wait, I'll go in for him," one of the boys interrupted. It was Manny Cato. He was a short, brown-skinned boy with eyes like a hawk. He had black curly hair and was rather frail. He kept gauges in his ears, the size of silver dollars, and wore a tribal necklace his mother made him out of bones. His name meant bold and good-hearted in the Arawak Indian language. He was standing up for one of his friends, who was being bullied by a member of the captain's crew. The boy had fallen ill, and they would have surely killed him if someone hadn't volunteered to take up his place. Manny Cato knew that this meant he would spend the rest of the day in the water, but he didn't care. The life he once knew was gone. Day after day, Manny Cato and the other boys just like him were forced by dreadful men to swim out into the ocean to collect pearls from the seashells deep at the bottom of the sea. The boy had an unusual gift for holding his breath. He could hold it longer and dive deeper than all of the other boys in his tribe. He came from a long line of powerful swimmers. His father was a fisherman, and so was the rest of his family. He was no stranger to the ocean. Sometimes he would let himself sink like a rock to the bottom. Things always seemed more peaceful to him underwater. He could feel the warmth of the water heated by the Caribbean sun. There wasn't a sound, just absolute quiet, and the feeling of the ocean currents drifting him back and forth gave him peace. His very captivity became his only escape. The ocean was like a beautiful prison to him. Down below he beheld the fish. It was Heim, they called them. If only he was a fish, he thought to himself. He would swim away. He often thought about escaping, but the pirates were quick to shoot runaways. They stood up above on board with their rifles pointed at the surface. "Shoot the bastards if they start feeling lucky," they shouted. "Captain's orders." There wasn't any other options left for the boys. It was either work or die. As he began running out of air, he looked over and saw a large rock. Curiously, he had reached his hand underneath it, and pulled out a rather dull-looking oyster shell. Making his way back to the surface, he could hear the pirates shouting, "Over here, boy! Quit your lollygagging! Hurry it up!" It was the captain. He was a tall man who stood with a hunch. He had one eye covered with a black patch, and he often smiled with a lopsided grin. His nose was hooked just as the red macaw that sat on his shoulders, and he walked with a limp. He was armed to the teeth with daggers and pistols, and dressed all in black. He wore a whole host of charms and trinkets around his neck, that he believed to bring good luck. He never shaved, but kept a long grey bushy beard. He looked like a ramshackle beggar, or a useless drunk. But even the other pirates feared him. His reputation preceded him. He would make his men richer than their wildest dreams, but if they questioned an order, they would die a painful and public death. The captain and 2 members of his crew stood in a small boat out on the sea. Every shell had to be brought in first for inspection by the captain. "Hurry it up!" he shouted again. "I don't have all day. Let's see what you got." The pirate gripped his sword with only 3 fingers and his thumb. Then snatching the shell from the boy, he turned it on its side and slid the blade into it, splitting it open. "Ah, there it is," he said greedily. "Wait a minute. What's this? A black pearl? It's a curse. You've brought a curse upon me and my whole motley crew. Why, you—" "No," the boy replied. "I didn't mean to." Don't say another word. Start swimming." "No, please," the boy shouted, latching onto the captain's heel. "I said get," said the captain while pointing with his sword out to the open sea. "And take that blasted pearl with you, now!" With that, the two members of the crew grabbed the boy by his arms and legs, then tossed him off the boat. While the others began shouting and lifting up their voices, saying, "Yeah, get out of here, you hear the captain." Shots began to fire off into the air. The boy, being frightened, turned around and started to swim, with the pearl clenched tightly in the palm of his right hand. It was just about nightfall when the boy finally stopped swimming. Up until that point, he had been too afraid to look back. He couldn't believe that he was still alive. He thought he was dead. He thought that one of the shots had hit him and that he would eventually end up foods for the sharks, just like all the others. Luckily, he made it out by the skin of his teeth. After catching a quick breath, the boy just kept swimming. But it wasn't long until a crippling fear took hold of him, giving him a horrible pain in his stomach. It was not the fear of being a small 8-year-old boy out in the open ocean. What frightened him the most was the thought of living the rest of his life free, knowing that his brothers were still slaves. That thought alone stirred up a whirlwind of emotion within him. Salty tears ran down his cheeks, dripped from his chin, and became one with the ocean that lapped his bare feet. He was determined at that moment to fight, and to lay his life down for his friends if he had to. Turning around, he began swimming back toward Cubagua Island. Lightning began to flash, and the sound of thunder could be heard, rumbling afar off. The boy's feet kicked in the water like a dolphin, and his hands cut through the waves with power and might. He kept swimming at top speed until finally coming within safe distance of the ship. He could see the pirates pushing and shoving the others one by one as they jumped into the water. Suddenly there was the sound of a shot fired, followed by a splash. The boy quickly began to panic. He knew what that ultimately meant. Tiburon. "You idiot!" yelled one of the pirates. "You know what happens when blood runs into the water?" Running out of time, he looked down into his hand. It was the black pearl. Without a moment's notice, he took a deep breath and swam back to where he had discovered it earlier. Once again, he reached underneath the large rock and found more of the same dull oysters. He kept a sharp eye out for his brothers, and just as one of them passed by, he grabbed hold of him and led them to the large rock. He did this repeatedly until the captain's boat became filled with the dull oysters. "No, this can't be!" the captain screamed as he opened the shells. "We're cursed! We're cursed! It's the curse of the black pearls!" One of the crew members just rolled his eyes. "Here we go again," he murmured to one of the other pirates. It wasn't uncommon for the captain to go on huge, superstitious rants from time to time. The crew had heard it all before. "Look," he extolled, "there's nothing left but the black ones. We have to get out of here. Haul the anchor! Batten down the hatches! We're leaving this bloody island." "What about the boys?" said one of the men. "Just leave them to the sharks," the captain snarled. The boy finally lifted his head up above the water, gasping for air. "There he is! It was you! This is all your fault. You brought this curse upon me and my whole motley crew!" And right then, he aimed his pistol right at the boy and fired a single shot. Pow! Afterward, the captain performed what seemed like a religious semantic. He always did it after using his pistol. He started by twirling the gun around his index finger 6 times, before switching it to the left hand, only to place the gun back into the holster on his right side. He always finishes by tipping his hat. He performed this all out of his own superstitions. Everything was going well until the unlucky moment he lost his hat in the wind. He went off chasing it all over the deck, staggering like a drunk man as the waves began tossing the ship to and fro. Flash! Bang! Were the sounds heard as the storm strengthened. The sky became pitch black and the gusts of wind blew with tremendous force. Losing his balance, Captain Webbs got his foot caught in one of the ropes attached to the sails. The unsecured rope sent the sail swinging in the wind and the captain along with it. The crew tried to regain control of the sail, but the force of the storm was too strong for them. "Get me down from here, you idiots! Get me down! Ah! Ah!" The rope wrapped around the captain's neck like a boa constrictor, suffocating its prey. The men did all they could, but it was too late. Captain Webbs had met his doom. As the sun set, the other members of the crew stood in silence, not knowing what to do, until one of the men took a knife and cut the rope, dropping the captain into the shark-infested waters below. Maybe there really is a curse, mumbled one of the crew, shaking in his boots. Meanwhile, Makinito could feel the thunder rumbling in the sky. The noises engulfed him, shaking him to the bone. His mind went blank right after staring into the barrel of Captain Webb's pistol, until he heard a voice shout, "Manikato, look out!" At the moment the shots fired, he dived straight down like a submarine. The bullets flew through the water like torpedoes, one of them piercing his left side. The wound was giving off a sharp pain like someone was sticking a piece of glass in it. He had been at the bottom now for what seemed like an eternity. Looking up, he could see flashes of lightning as the water illuminated around him. The raindrops hit the surface of the water, creating a beautiful ripple effect. He caught himself daydreaming again, drifting back and forth, until suddenly there it was. Tuberon! Looking up, he spotted a shark swimming up above him. His heart began racing, and he was running out of breath, but he knew he had to remain still and calm. Any sudden movements could become his last. Once the shark had passed by, he began slowly moving back toward the surface. Thunder rolled across the sky, seeming to crack the world in half, revealing the fury of God. Waves as high as skyscrapers rocked the ship. Men's hearts began failing them for fear of the things that had come upon them. The only sure way to escape was to go in a storm. This is our only chance, he thought. With one hand on his side, and the other keeping him afloat, he shouted, "Come on, we have to make it to shore while there's still time!" One by one, the boys began jumping into the water. They were not troubled by the storm. Instead, they embraced it as a benevolent gift from the divine creator. For it was with a stretched out arm and fury poured out that they were being delivered. "Fear not what lays ahead, my brothers," Manikato exclaimed, "for our God is already there." From there, the boys swam towards shore all together, their hearts racing, adrenaline pumping from the fear and uncertainty of sharks lurking in the waters beneath them. The thought of being devoured limb by limb was the only thing running through their minds. Nevertheless, they pushed forward on nothing but faith and hope toward that little island of milk and honey they called home, holding on to the words of Manikanto, their friend. The remainder of the crew looked on helplessly as all hell began breaking loose. It was every man for himself. "We've got to get out of here!" one of the men shrieked. And so the storm raged on. The sun set, darkness fell, and the ship set sail. The next morning the sea was calm, and the palm trees danced gently in the cool island breeze. The ocean shined clear like a crystal as the reflection of the sun bounced off it. Seagulls were calling and flying across the water, looking for food. The air was crisp and fresh, purified by the storm. As the boys approached the shore, they could see pieces of shipwreck scattered all across the ocean. There wasn't a single sign of any members of the crew. For what the storm didn't destroy, the sharks were sure to finish off for sure. Only experienced swimmers were capable of navigating the water in such extreme conditions. None the likes of those unruly pirates, the boys thought. "Where's Manikato?" one of them asked. From a distance, they heard the faint sounds of weeping. They followed the sounds of the sobs to a large waterfall. The waterfall gushed out into a pool, underneath it filling it with pure fresh water. Closer still, they drew until they were in the plume of water vapour that hung over the plunge pool. In only minutes, they were as wet as they would have been in any rainstorm. Their hair clung to their heads and around their faces. The atmosphere was heavy and damp. The sea had disappeared from sight, and now they were surrounded by an impenetrable screen of vegetation. "Look over there!" one of the boys shouted. It was Leon, the sick boy that Manikato saved, standing in the pool. "Manikato didn't make it," he said, sighing deeply. "He defended us with his life, even when the odds were insurmountable. He gave us comfort in the difficult and painful times. He never waged war, he only did what was necessary for a noble defense. His sacrifice will never be forgotten. The power of love will always be greater than any other, and the keys to life will only ever be given to God's true believers." Then, raising his hands to the sky, he gave thanks to the one true God of heaven and earth. At that moment, he felt the sun break through the clouds, warming his back. A rainbow appeared through the mist of the vapours created by the waterfall. A smile filled his face, and immediately all the boys came rushing toward him, splashing, laughing, and rejoicing. They all hugged one another and were filled with brotherly love. They were finally free. The end.